Mayor and Commissioners. A couple of weeks ago there was an article about municipal meetings and invocations in the Orlando Sentinel in which Mr. Ballhofer was quoted as saying, "We've had a humanist, we've had several non-religious groups do the invocation. I'm working to diversify that list. I just haven't been able to find in the Yellow Pages a listing for humanists." There are a few things I'd like to say about this statement. First, you haven't had a humanist. The only non-religious invocation you've had was on behalf of the non-existent Winter Garden atheists. The content could be considered humanist, but he was not from a group that was specifically humanist. Second, it is true that several non-religious groups have done the invocation, but this is an obvious red herring since every one of those non-religious groups has opted for a religious, specifically Christian, invocation. Suggesting that there is some diversity in the invocations because some of the groups are non-religious is very dishonest. More than 98% of the invocations have been religious, and all but one of those were Christian. Third, if Mr. Ballhofer is truly working to diversify the list, then I hope he is not limiting his search to the humanists he mentioned. I'm sure there are many Mormons in town, probably some Muslims and Hindus, and there's a Buddhist temple down the road in Ocoee. Perhaps someone associated with it lives in Winter Garden. But this sounds like a lot of work. I would much rather Mr. Ballhofer spend his time and my tax money keeping the city on track. Perhaps the board would consider changing the invocation policy so that the only requirement for giving an invocation is being a resident or a designated representative of a resident. That would make diversity easier to come by. As a side note, the restrictions in the current policy have resulted in at least 3 non-religious invocators and 1 religious invocator being removed from the list, thereby reducing diversity. At the same time as this policy change to increase diversity, you could unselfishly switch to a strict rotation of invocators rather than the commission-selected invocators so that everyone who wanted to do an invocation was afforded equal opportunity. Or you could save Mr. Ballhofer's time and my tax money and return to a moment of silence or even skip this ceremony completely. There is, after all, no requirement to have one. Thank you for your consideration.